Alien children played ball, while she could only watch until a human gave her a prosthetic leg.
Rain slicked the stone tiles of the colony square, thin streams running toward the clogged drains at each corner. The faint smell of wet concrete mixed with something sour from the market stalls, fruit gone bad in crates, cloth dye leaching into the runoff. Amber street lamps threw uneven light across the puddles where children chased a patched soccer ball, their shouts echoing against the cracked facades of shuttered buildings. On the fountain steps sat a girl who wasn't part of their game. She kept her back straight, hands flat against the cold stone at her sides. Her skin was a pale violet blue, smooth but chilled, and her hair, white like washed-out chalk, clung damp to her neck. The left leg of her trousers was neatly folded and pinned just above the knee. She kept her eyes on the ball as it passed from one player to another, following its path with the quiet focus of someone who had learned to sit still when it mattered. Malric Dane noticed her before he realized he'd stopped walking. He was on his way back from the West Quarter, his satchel heavy with field notes and the cracked datapad he used for mapping abandoned districts. His job wasn't glamorous. No one wrote about urban surveyors in the colony bulletin, but the city archive paid him to record what was falling apart and, occasionally, to recommend which broken things might be worth fixing. He'd been doing it for 7 years now, long enough to know that most of his reports went unread. He told himself to keep moving. His boots were already wet from crossing a section where the drainage had failed, but his eyes went back to the girl, to the way her fingers curled against the stone as the ball came closer. A boy overkicked, sending the ball skidding toward her. She flinched before it even reached the bottom step. The ball stopped just short of her good foot. For a moment, she stared at it. Then her gaze shifted down to the empty cloth of her trouser leg. The laughter from the game changed tone, still playful, but edged now with the restless curiosity children had when something was different. She turned her face away. Malric stepped forward and trapped the ball with his boot. "Want it?" His voice came out even, not loud enough to draw more attention. The girl looked up at him without speaking. Her eyes were large, dark at the center, guarded but alert. She didn't reach for the ball. A boy called out, "Hey, mister, we're playing." Malric glanced at the boy, then at the girl again. He nudged the ball closer to her foot. She held his gaze for a moment, then gave the ball a soft, quick tap back toward him. Her balance was good, better than he expected for someone standing on one leg, but the movement was cautious, controlled. He sent the ball rolling back into the game. The shouts resumed, and the circle of players shifted slightly, giving her more space at the edge. She sat back down, hands resting on the step. It was then that Malric noticed the woman standing under the narrow overhang of a boarded-up shop. She was tall, her violet-toned skin catching the light in a faint sheen. Loose silver-white hair fell past her shoulders. Her clothes were worn but deliberately adjusted. A thin skirt with an uneven hem, a fitted top with frayed straps that she kept pulling into place. She held a small canvas bag and a folded cloth. Her posture was still, watchful, and her attention was fixed on the girl. Malric guessed this was the child's mother. He didn't approach. It wasn't his place, not yet. He had learned over years of field work that in places like this, uninvited questions closed more doors than they opened. Instead, he took in the details he would need for his report. The square's drainage was poor. Water pooled ankle-deep in some sections. One of the street lamps flickered with a short that would need addressing before it failed entirely. The fountain stone base was cracked along the north side, thin rivulets leaking through. He also logged something the archive had no form for, the way the girl's shoulders eased slightly when she touched the ball. Malric's original plan had been simple. Finish his survey, head back to his one-room flat in the mid-tier residential block, and file his notes before the end of shift. But as he stood there, watching the girl return her focus to the game, the image of her empty trouser leg fixed itself in his mind. It wasn't pity. Pity never lasted long enough to matter. It was something closer to recognition, a practical awareness that this wasn't a situation that would change on its own. From the overhang, the woman's eyes met his. There was no greeting, no smile, just a slow, assessing glance. He gave a small nod, the sort used between people who shared a street without knowing each other's names. She returned it with the barest tilt of her chin, then stepped forward to collect her daughter. "Ilari," she said, her voice low and clear. The girl stood, moving with a quick, practiced shift of weight to her crutch, which Malric hadn't noticed until now. It leaned against the fountain's base, worn smooth along the grip. She tucked it under her arm and moved to her mother's side. Malric didn't speak again. He watched them leave through the narrow lane at the far end of the square, the woman setting an even pace, the girl matching it without complaint. When they were gone, he opened his datapad and made a private note outside of his standard report. Check archived medical supply inventories, pediatric prosthetics. He didn't know why he wrote it now instead of later. Maybe because the window to act felt smaller than it looked. The game went on behind him. The square smelled of rain and rust. Malric slung his satchel higher on his shoulder and turned toward the next block, his route altered without thinking about it, his mind already running through which storerooms might still be unlocked. The back alleys behind the market held the night longer than the main square, shade caught between stacked crates and narrow eaves where rain still dripped in a slow, steady beat. Generators throbbed somewhere behind corrugated metal. A vendor's burner hissed and went quiet. Malric kept to the left wall, where the ground rose slightly and the runoff didn't soak his boots, his satchel pulling at his shoulder as he traced a route he'd walked 100 times on surveys, but tonight with a different purpose, because the note he'd written, check archived medical inventories, had turned into a task that felt urgent in a way he couldn't file away. He found them where the alley dog-legged into a cramped lane of salvage tables. Ilari stood on her right leg, crutch tucked tight under her arm, reaching for the bottom of a plastic crate. The toy inside was cheap and broken, a hollow ball with one side caved in and a loose rattle trapped in the seam. But her face was set with careful concentration as if the reach itself mattered more than the prize. Neris hovered a step back with a small canvas bag against her hip, her posture turned sideways to block the slow traffic of bodies that brushed past without looking. She had changed nothing about herself since the square. The thin skirt still clung at the damp hem. The fitted top still held at a frayed strap she adjusted when a glance lingered too long. The wire in her hair still pinched a lock at the nape. The choices weren't style. They were what the textile heaps offered and what dried fastest on a heater rail. Too far, the vendor grunted without turning, his attention on a handheld scale that never settled. By something else. Malric stepped in. How much for the crate toy? The vendor blinked up, surprised anyone cared. 2 credits. It's cracked, Malric said. So, is everything, the man said. 1.5 if you stop talking. Malric paid and handed the toy to Ilari without ceremony. For balance training, he said, and only then noticed he'd said it like a clinician, which he was not. Ilari rolled the ball in her palms, listening to the loose rattle. Thank you, she said, voice small but steady. Neris's eyes moved to Malric's satchel, to the scuffed corners and the city seal stamped faint on the flap. Survey, she said, placing him again. Not a question, not friendly, simply accurate. Mapping the West Quarter after the flood last month, he said. Tagging faults. The drains at the square are flagged. I'll push the ticket so someone actually reads it. They will ignore it, she said, then softened by half a degree. But the marker will remind them when they walk past. Malric looked at Ilari. How old? 8, Ilari said before her mother could answer. 8 in a month, Neris added, because facts mattered. Ilari bounced the broken ball once in her palm, testing weight. She tried a short toss to herself and caught it with both hands. The rattle clicked. The motion shifted her balance. She compensated fast. Malric watched how she corrected. Hip turn, shoulder drop, the micro pause before the crutch tip reset. Good instincts. Good strength. A question pressed forward that he hadn't asked in the square because it wasn't his right. He kept his tone even and his eyes on Ilari's hands. Clinic ever fit you for a leg? Neris's answer came after a beat. They left, she said. 2 years ago. Funding pulled. The last appointment was a list of exercises and a pamphlet that turned to pulp when a roof leaked. Ilari didn't look up. The pamphlet had a picture of a girl running. Malric nodded, not because it was fine, it wasn't, but because he had no interest in pity. Which clinic? South Wing, Ward C, Neris said. closed and chained. We tried the charity box at North, but they wanted a referral code. I don't have family to press. The absent piece hung there. The father, and Malric let it stay unspoken because forcing that answer in an alley served no one. He set the crate toy down and crouched to Ilari's level, careful not to crowd. What happened? He asked, and kept it open so she or her mother could take it. Ilari's mouth tightened. Her eyes shifted to Neris. Permission again. Neris gave a small nod. A spanner fell from the 4th floor. Ilari said, words neat as counted steps. When the laundry block still worked. I went up the service stairs, even though we weren't meant to. A man dropped a bag of tools and shouted. I didn't move fast enough. Neris kept her voice steady. No one prepared the railing. No one fenced the drop. They brought her towards C. Infection took what the spanner didn't. It explained the clean line of the amputation and the neat fold of the trouser leg. It also explained the guarded looks, the precision in how Neris moved her daughter through crowds, the way Ilari measured space before she shifted. Malric kept his face neutral because anger had uses but not in front of child. I'm sorry, he said, plain and final, and rose. He could feel Neris weighing him. What does this man want? What will he ask for? How long until he disappears? He had nothing to trade except work. I can look for a leg, he said. There are closed storerooms with forgotten stock. I don't promise anything. I don't ask for anything. Neris studied him for a long second. Do you have the authority to open those doors? I have keys people forget to take back, he said, and a badge that still opens locks no one bothered to reassign. That is not authority, she said, but the edge in her voice eased. It is usefulness. Usefulness is what gets things done, he said. Ilari tested the ball again, a little stronger. She missed the catch, and it skittered to Malric's boot. He stopped it and sent it back with a soft pass. What is your mission? Neris asked, and this time he heard that she meant more than tonight. He answered the only way that wouldn't feel like a speech. I log what breaks before it falls on someone. I file for repairs. I chase the ones that matter until someone signs or tells me to stop in writing, and then I file again anyway. Off the record, he tapped the satchel. I keep a list of things that should exist and don't. A leg for a kid belongs at the top. She took that in without a visible reaction, then shifted the canvas bag to her other hip. We live in the old laundry block. 3rd floor, in unit that smells like citrus. The dryer vent leaks. If you knock like a neighbor and not like a man with a question. Understood, he said, and logged the dryer vent in his head as both a fire risk and a way to arrive without pretense. From a lane mouth, 2 men drifted past, eyes sliding over Neris in a way that had nothing to do with conversation. She turned her body by a few degrees, putting her shoulder between them, and Ilari, the move practiced, efficient, not aggressive. Malric didn't insert himself or posture. He stood there and filled space without making a show of it. The men kept walking. You don't stare like the others, Ilari said, surprising them both. I'm at work, he said, and your mother would break my fingers. That pulled the smallest breath of humor from Neris. Correct. Ilari tilted her head. Do you play ball? Badly, he said, but I know how to pass. Then pass tomorrow, she said, as if scheduling it would make it real. Tomorrow, he said, if I'm not locked in a records room. He left them there because staying would turn help into spectacle, and he had doors to open before someone remembered to change a lock. He cut through a service passage and into the side entrance of the municipal annex, the hall cool and bright with lights that no longer dimmed on timers because the timers had failed years ago and no one had fixed them. He flashed his badge at the dead scanner out of habit and pushed through to the archive stairwell where the smell shifted from wet metal to paper and dust. The records floor held long aisles of boxed forms and obsolete terminals. He went past them toward the supply cage, a chain link room with a padlock someone had replaced with a cheaper model after the last budget cut. His key ring had a twin for it. He turned the lock, rolled the door, and stepped inside. Shelves climbed to the ceiling with surplus no one tracked. Sealed water filters, expired med patches, bundles of thermal blankets, cartons of clinic disposables. He kept his hands at chest height to avoid the illusion that he was shopping. This wasn't charity. This was inventory that should have been used and wasn't. He found a stack of plastic cases stamped with a clinic manufacturer's mark, prosthetic components, pediatric sizes, unopened. The labels listed sockets, pylons, foot shells, cuff straps. He pulled two at once and set them on a rolling cart, his mind already on fit and adjustment, on liners and stump measurements, on the reality that a first leg rarely fit right the first time, but that a wrong fit could still teach balance and confidence until a right fit came through. A corner of his brain, trained by years of paperwork, whispered about forms, requisitions, signatures. He listened and made a calculation. The clinic that ordered these closed 2 years ago. The patients it meant to serve had scattered. The off-books list in his satchel wasn't official, but it was honest. He would log the cases under field test, urban mobility study, a project abandoned in name but still alive enough on a server that the entry wouldn't throw an error. If someone asked, he would walk them to the square and let them watch a child stand in a circle that had once excluded her. He closed the cage and relocked it, the key turning with a clean click. On his way out, he stopped at a bin of small items and took a pack of soft straps and a set of hex tools, because fittings in apartments meant improvisation and he preferred not to borrow a neighbor's rusted wrench. Outside, the alley air felt warmer. He checked the time and the route to the laundry block. He could carry the cases now and knock like a neighbor, but he paused. Don't rush. Don't make this about you. Show up with parts and patience when the day is quiet, when Ilari isn't exhausted and Neris has space to say no if she wants to. He turned the other direction and walked home with the weight of the cases of promise across his shoulders. As he crossed the square, the kids were gone and the puddles were calmer. He stopped at the fountain, pressed a new adhesive tag over the crack he'd marked, brighter and larger, then took a photo for a report that he would push to the top of the queue at dawn. Small repairs made fields safer. Safer fields made practice longer. Longer practice made confidence real. At the far edge of the square, a maintenance door opened and a woman from the block stepped out with a basket of citrus peels, the scent sharp in the rain. Maurik smiled at the detail because he now knew which unit that smell meant. He walked on, the cases steady against his back, his thoughts organized in quick, simple steps. Measure, fit, adjust, teach. Ask what Ilari wants from the leg. Ask what Neris fears. Keep the visit short. Come back if invited. Leave clean notes. Push the drain ticket again. Behind the list ran a quieter line he didn't write anywhere. He had not fixed anything yet. He might fail, but the door wasn't locked tonight, and he had keys, and the city changed when people used what they had with care. So he would start there and let the next decision come when he reached it. By the next afternoon, the rain had broken into scattered clouds, sunlight cutting through the alleyways in uneven strips that steamed off the pavement. Maurik adjusted the strap of his satchel and shifted the two sealed prosthetic cases into a fabric carrier slung over his shoulder. The weight wasn't much, but he kept it balanced and low so it wouldn't be obvious to anyone watching from doorways or windows. The old laundry block stood ahead, its top floor windows opened just enough to vent the heat trapped inside. Even from the street, the faint scent of citrus carried down, sharp and clean in a place where most air was thick with damp and rust. He slowed before reaching the entrance. From the first two encounters, he'd learned enough to know that turning up with something this important required more than knocking. Some residents guarded their doorways like checkpoints, and Neris had made it clear she preferred control over who crossed her threshold. The plan was simple. Approach with the language of a neighbor, not an official, and offer the leg as a tool, not a rescue. Inside, the stairwell was narrow and badly lit. The rail wobbled under his hand, its bolts stripped. Laundry lines hung overhead, dripping onto the cracked tile floor. On the third landing, a boy carrying a bucket of wash water stepped aside without a word. Maurik nodded, the kind of passing courtesy that signaled he wasn't here to police anyone's business. He found the last door at the end of the corridor. The frame had been painted over so many times that the hinges were half sealed, but the latch was sound. He knocked twice, firm, spaced out, exactly as she told him. Neris opened after a moment, leaning against the doorframe. She wore the same skirt as before, but with a different top. Still fitted, still scavenged, but this one a faded green with a strap that had been re-sewn by hand. Her hair was loose, slightly damp, and her expression was unreadable until her eyes moved to the carrier at his side. "You came back," she said, not warm but not closed. "I found something," he replied. "Might fit. We'll know once we try." She stepped back, opening the door wider without speaking further. The apartment was small, one main room with a low table, 2 chairs, and a narrow counter against the wall. Clothes hung from a line near the heater. The scent of citrus was stronger inside. Real fruit peel drying on a tray near the window, probably to mask the damp smell that clung to these blocks. Ilari sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting bottle caps in a neat rows. She looked up when he entered, her eyes going straight to the carrier. "Is that for me?" "It's for us to see if it works for you," Maurik said, setting the cases on the table. "First fittings are never perfect, but it'll be a start." She scrambled up, steadying herself on the crutch. "I've never had one." Maurik glanced at Neris, expecting her to confirm, but instead she asked, "Do you need tools?" "I brought them," he said, tapping the side pocket of his satchel. They cleared a space in the center of the room. Ilari sat on a cushion while Maurik opened the first case, revealing a compact pylon, adjustable socket, and soft straps. He spoke as he worked, partly to keep her informed, partly to give Neris time to watch the process. "This piece will go around your thigh. This one connects to the foot. We'll adjust the angle so it matches your stance." Ilari leaned forward, eyes fixed on each component, as if committing them to memory. Neris stayed at the edge of the space, arms crossed loosely, not in defiance, but in a way that kept her hands free to step in if needed. "Is it heavy?" Ilari asked. "Not for you," Maurik said. "The weight's meant to feel like part of you, so it moves naturally." The fitting took time. He measured the stump, trimmed the liner to size, and adjusted the straps until they were snug but not tight. Each time he asked her to stand, she tried without hesitation, gripping the crutch in one hand for balance. The first step was awkward. She laughed once when the foot tipped too far forward. "Again," she said. They repeated the process, Maurik making small adjustments while explaining what he was changing. He noticed that Neris's eyes never left her daughter. Not the device, not him, but Ilari's face. When the alignment finally held steady for 3 steps in a row, Ilari's grin spread wide. "Better than I thought," she said, breath quick from the effort. "You'll get faster," Maurik told her. "We'll start with short walks around the room. Later we'll try the hallway." She nodded, already ready for more. Neris moved to the table and picked up the old crutch. "We'll keep this close for now." "That's smart," Maurik said. He began packing the unused parts back into the case, leaving the fitted leg on Ilari. Before he could close the case, Neris spoke quietly. "How did you get it?" He met her eyes. "Closed storeroom. No one's used them in years. And if they come looking, they won't. Inventory's been dead since the clinic closed. If anyone asks, it's on a field test list that no one reads." She studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Then you've bought her more than a tool." Maurik didn't ask what she meant. He understood. Mobility was freedom, and freedom changed how others saw you. It also changed how you saw yourself. Before he left, Ilari walked him to the door without the crutch, her steps careful but sure. "Tomorrow," she said, as if confirming their earlier agreement. "Tomorrow," he replied. In the stairwell, he considered the gaps that had been filled today, the exact cause of her injury, the fact she'd never had a prosthetic, the clarity that Neris's caution wasn't hostility, but the habit of someone who'd been given too many empty promises. These were the details the square hadn't shown, and they made the task ahead clearer. The leg was only the beginning. When he stepped back into the street, the clouds were breaking, and somewhere down the block, the sound of a ball striking stone carried faint but sharp through the air. It was enough to make him decide he'd return sooner than tomorrow if he could. Maurik reached the street and stopped under the overhang to note the time, then turned his slate face down because he knew if he let the task list expand, it would swallow the day. And this part wasn't a task, it was the point of the work, so he crossed back to the square and watched how the water had pulled away from the worst corners and how the new tag on the fountain still held its color in the sun. And when the hour felt right, he went back to the laundry block with a small cloth bag of bread and a packet of salt, because arriving with tools said one thing and arriving with food said another. He knocked the same way as before. Neris opened with the same measured stance, but her shoulders were less tight, and she didn't block the doorway with her body. And behind her, Ilari stood on the fitted leg, hand resting on the table, hair tied back with a scrap of ribbon that matched nothing but kept stray strands out of her eyes. The room was warmer than yesterday. The heater clicked in a steady rhythm. A tray of peels had browned on the windowsill and smelled clean. "You're early," Neris said. "I had a quiet hour," Malric said, "and a plan to try the hallway if you agree." "Bread?" Ilari asked, already spotting the bag. "Share," Neris said, but there was the start of a smile. They ate at the low table. Ilari kept one hand on the edge for balance when she stood to wash the crumbs from her fingers, and Malric watched the way her knee tracked over the footshell now. More stable than yesterday. Her weight shift more confident, and when he looked up, Neris was already watching him watch, not as a challenge, but as a reminder that observation was fine and outcome mattered more. "The hallway first," she said. "No stairs until she can pivot without looking at her feet." "That's right," Malric said. "We'll mark the line from door to stairhead. 6 passes. Rest between." Ilari nodded, serious now. "I want the square," she said, and the way she said it told him she expected to earn it. They cleared the table and moved to the corridor. The building had gone quiet. Most residents were out chasing work or food. A woman 2 doors down leaned her mop against the rail and watched from her threshold. And a little farther, a man raised his chin once and then went back to fixing a shorted lamp with a twist of wire. The floor tile was chipped and uneven. Malric stepped it first, heel to toe, and found the cleanest path. "Eyes forward," he said to Ilari. "Hands ready to brush the wall if you need it. Small steps, set the heel, roll to the ball, don't chase speed." She went. The first pass was stiff. The second was smoother. On the third, her foot placed a little too far inside, and she tipped. Malric moved in without touching her, showing his hands open at his sides, and she recovered with a quick counter step and a small, angry breath. "I had it," she said. "I know," he said, "and you got it back fast. That's what matters." Neris stayed behind them by 2 paces, not hovering but present. And on the 5th pass, she spoke, not to correct, but to ask, and it surprised him because the question wasn't about the leg at all. "What did you do before the archives?" she said. Malric didn't look back. He kept his eyes on Ilari's gate so he could answer and still watch the angle. "Field tech for a civil team," he said. "We built culvert channels and floodgates in the outer wards. Then the contract shifted to private vendors, and the crews got smaller, and the oversight got worse. And a bridge slab went early over the West Canal and took a boy with it while I stood on the bank with a sensor and a form that said the slab was safe. And I watched the family and the foreman fight over blame while the river took the body, and I couldn't stand on that side anymore. So I crossed to the side that measures and complains in writing until someone has to sign." Ilari stopped at the stairhead, chest rising fast. She looked up at him, then at her mother, then down the hall. She had just walked as if measuring the distance not in tiles, but in what it meant to have covered them without someone carrying her. "Is the boy why you looked at me?" she asked. Malric kept his answer simple. "He is why I don't leave when I can stay and help someone stand." Ilari nodded once, as if filing the fact in a small box she would open later. Neris did not speak. She didn't have to. Her hand had loosened against the wall. "Turn," Malric said softly. "Slow. Head first, shoulders next, hips last, step the foot. Let the socket follow. Don't fight the strap." She turned. The 6th pass was steady. At the door, she rested and took water from the cup Neris held out, and she didn't try to hide the small tremor in her thigh, because fatigue was just another fact, not a failure. "Hallway again, or stairs?" Ilari asked once. She caught her breath. "Hallway," Neris said. "Stairs," Malric said at the same time. They all paused. Neris looked at him. He held the look and kept his tone respectful. "1 step down and back up," he said, "with a rail. I'll spot. She'll know how it feels before her brain can build fear around it." Neris waited for 2 long seconds, then nodded. "1 step," she said. "Then we stop." At the stairhead, Malric showed Ilari the sequence with his own feet and hands. Good foot first going up, prosthetic first going down, hand on the rail, other hand ready near the wall. Eyes on where the next foot goes, not the bottom of the stair. She set her right foot to the first step down and shifted her weight. The prosthetic moved, touched, then searched for the angle. She froze. Her breathing picked up. The hallway felt closer. Malric lifted his hand toward the rail, not to touch her, but to show where to press. You decide, he said. If you want to call it and try later, we try later. If you want to stare now, take it slow and let the rail hold what your leg doesn't. She set her jaw and went down the one step. The pylon flexed. The cuff bit in her thigh. She made a low sound, not pain exactly, more the body's protest at a new load. And then she was on the lower tread and safe, and she looked up with a flash of triumph that broke into an embarrassed laugh, and Nerys let out a breath she had held too long. Back up, Ilari said, already moving. Good foot first, Malric said, and she climbed with a hard push and a clean pull from the rail. And when she stood level again, Nerys lifted her hand to the back of Ilari's head and smoothed the hair that had escaped the ribbon, a small touch that read as relief and praise and control returning all at once. Enough, Nerys said. Water. Food. Then we talk about the square. Back inside, Ilari ate quickly and then slumped sideways on the cushion, asleep inside 5 minutes with her cheek against her arm and one hand still curled as if gripping a rail. Nerys covered her with a thin blanket and sat opposite Malric at the table. The room hummed with the heater. A drip in the sink ticked like a metronome. You spoke about a family and a foreman, she said. Whose fault was it really? Both, and mine, Malric said. The family trusted a map that said the slab was rated for the load. The foreman cut corners to keep the schedule. I filed a concern about the seam a week earlier, and then let a supervisor bury it because the vendor paid for the job. I have a signature that proves I called it out. It didn't keep the boy alive. She absorbed that without blinking. So now you collect broken things and force someone to see them. I try, he said. Sometimes the only thing I can fix is how long it takes for someone to admit the break. And what do you want from us? She said, the question too blunt to dodge. Nothing you don't offer, he said. I'll come to help with the fitting and the practice until you tell me not to. If the leg needs parts, I'll search. If the square needs a line painted so kids keep a clear lane by the steps, I'll paint it at night and dare the market office to find me. You think painting a line will change how they look at her, she said, not mocking, just testing. No, he said. I think when she kicks the ball clean, they will look at the ball and not at the leg, and a line give her space to make that kick until they stop crowding her out of habit. Nerys glanced at her daughter, asleep and open-mouthed now, then back at him. If she falls in the square and tears the skin, we are back to infection and fever and the clinic door with a chain, she said. We tape foam to the first cord edge, he said. We tape her liner where it rubs. We bring a clean cloth and a bottle with boiled water. We keep the practice short. We leave before she's tired enough to risk it. And if the men who stare decide your help is a path to me, she said, the sharpest of her fears now on the table, then I make it very clear they misread every sign, he said, steady and plain. And if my presence makes it worse, I step back and keep working on the parts that don't put you in their path. She sat with that, then nodded once. Tomorrow we try the square, she said. Early, before the stalls open. I'll bring tape, he said. He stood to leave. At the door, she stopped him with a small gesture. You said a bridge slab went early, she said. Did you go back there after? Every month, he said. I take the long way to make sure the warning placards are still up and the new seam has no cracks. And I watch the river for a minute because there's nothing else to do for him now. You can stop watching the river for him, she said, not unkind, not soft, simply firm. Watch it for the living. He held her gaze and accepted the correction. All right, he said. In the corridor, he adjusted the strap of his satchel and listened to the building breathe, pipes gently ticking, someone across the hall singing under their breath. The kind of ordinary sound that told him today's work had landed in a real place, not just on a form. And when he reached the stairwell, he took the first step down and felt the rail under his palm the way Ilari had. Not as a weakness, but as a tool. And he planned the morning in clear steps. Foam, tape, cloth, water, a wide lane. Marked with chalk, 3 passes and a break, a last pass and a clean stop. So that when the moment came, the only thing left for Ilari to do was look up at a ball and decide to meet it. Dawn came in a dry hush, the square still and pale before the market woke. Puddles reduced to shallow mirrors that didn't hide the cracks, and Malric arrived first with a roll of tape, a stick of chalk, a small bottle of boiled water wrapped in a towel, a strip of foam cut from an old packing sheet, and a cloth bag with bread and 2 cups because practice would run better if no one was hungry. And he checked the fountain tag he'd placed earlier and found it intact and bright, which told him no. One had scraped it off in the night. Neris and Ilari crossed from the laundry block entrance together. Ilari's hair tied back in a clean ribbon and the fitted legs strapped tight under trousers that had been cut and hemmed again to sit well over the socket. Neris in the faded green top from yesterday, with the strap resewn again, skirt dry and straight, eyes scanning the edges of the square out of habit, measuring exits, measuring faces, not looking for trouble so much as mapping how to keep space clear. And when they reached him, Ilari tried to hide her smile and failed. "Early is best," Neris said. "Early is ours," Malric said. He knelt and taped the foam to the corner of the fountain base where the first turn would send Ilari's foot, then chalked a wide lane from the steps out and back in a shallow arc that kept her away from the uneven tile. And the white line looked simple and obvious, like something that should have always been there, because simple things that help often do. And he stepped back and checked the angles one more time. "First pass slow," he said. "Ball comes later. We get the path first." Ilari nodded and set off with her hands open and low, weight centered, eyes up, because she had learned yesterday that looking down cost balance, her right foot planting clean and the prosthetic heel setting with a soft scrape that sounded honest in the quiet. And she reached the curve, touched the foam with the side of her shoe, pivoted, and came back along the chalk, breath steady, shoulders relaxed. "Again," she said. On the third pass, she moved faster than her head was ready for, and the foot shell bumped a raised tile, and the pylon flexed wrong, and she caught herself with a small hop that made the strap bite, and she stopped with her jaw tight, not crying, not brushing it off, just accepting the sting as a signal to adjust. And Maurer crouched and shifted the cuff a notch and smoothed the liner where it had folded. "You tell me when it rubs," he said. "We adjust before the skin does." "Okay," she said. The market began to stir, shutters sliding up, a burner lighting with a sharp click, wheels rattling on cracked pavement. So Malric moved to the fountain edge and set the cloth bag where it wouldn't draw attention, and he saw 2 men cross the far side and glance toward Neris the way men often did. And he didn't stiffen or stare them down because that invited the wrong kind of attention. He simply stood in a way that narrowed the line of sight and made the picture of the morning about a child. A chalk lane and a simple drill. "Ball?" Ilari asked. "Ready now." "Ball," Malric said, and he took a scuffed one from the bag. Not the kid's patch favorite, because he didn't want them thinking he'd taken it. This one from a salvage stall that had cost only half a credit because the bladder leaked slow, and he set it in front of her on the chalk. "Inside of the foot. Small pass. Stop and plant. Don't chase it," he said. She passed to him, light and straight. He returned the ball along the line at a speed that required her to meet it but not fear it, and she trapped it against her good foot and sent it back again. And on the fourth exchange, she misjudged the angle, and the ball edged toward the wet seam near the drain. And she chose not to chase, she let it go, which told him she was thinking rather than reacting. "Good call," he said, retrieving it. "We keep the drill over the chalk." 2 kids from the next block came running with a set of bent cups and a plastic cone, then hesitated at the edge of the square when they saw the line and the foam and the woman with the watchful eyes. And Malric broke the standoff by lifting the ball and giving Ilari a look that asked if she wanted this next part in front of an audience, and she nodded without looking at the kids. He called to them. "We'll be done with the lane in 10 minutes, he said. "Then you can use the court. Watch the line until then." The older of the 2 shrugged and sat on the step to wait, twirling the cone on one finger. The younger watched Ilari, curious but not unkind. "Pass and step," Malric said. "Pass and step." Ilari's rhythm smooth, the sound of the ball on her shoe clean, her breath louder now with effort, and Neris shifted her stance at the edge of the lane in a way that meant she was ready to step in if the pattern faltered. But she didn't speak. She let Ilari find the flow. A vendor dragged a cart across the far side, metal screeching against stone, and Ilari's head turned, instinctive and fast, and the ball clipped the inside of her prosthetic foot and bumped away toward the waiting kids. And for a heartbeat she froze, cheeks flushing. Then she blew the breath out and reset her feet. "Again," she said, calm and firm. The younger kid trapped the ball, and sent it back with a careful push that respected the lane. "You're better than my cousin," he announced. "Your cousin stands too close to the ball," Ilari said without looking at him. And Maurik caught the quick flash of pride on the boy's face that she had answered him like a player and not like a kid being humored. Neris stepped to Maurik's side. "We'll stop before she reaches the point where the leg drags," she said. "3 more sets," he said. "Then food." "Food," Ilari echoed, not as a request, but as a checkpoint she intended to earn. On the last set, Maurik added a short pivot, a half-turn to simulate a return pass, and Ilari hesitated because the movement demanded trust in the socket, then committed, the foot shell slid and gripped, the pylon held, and the pass back came from a clean plant that made a good sound. And the 2 kids who had been waiting clapped once, sharp and real, then pretended they hadn't clapped at all. They moved to the fountain and sat on the stone where the foam made a soft edge. Maurik poured water into the cups and handed out pieces of bread, and he added a small twist of salt to Ilari's cup, because sweat mattered even in morning practice, and she drank without complaint. The market was awake now. The maintenance crew, he didn't expect this, soon rolled in with a patched pump and a coil of hose, and one of them pointed at Maurik's bright tag, and then at the crack in the fountain base, and gave a thumb up, not a promise of repair today, but a sign that the ticket had moved, and Maurik felt the clean relief of seeing a line on a report turn into a person with a tool. Neris watched the crew, then looked at Maurik. "You said sometimes the thin hopes hold," she said. "Today one did," he said. Ilari leaned against the fountain and let her leg rest straight. "Will they fix it before the game tomorrow?" she asked, practical. "Maybe not," Maurik said, "but they'll stop the worst leak. Less water means fewer slips." She took that as enough. Then, almost as an afterthought, she asked the question she hadn't asked yet. "Will the leg always pinch like that when I turn?" "No," he said. "It pinches when the liner folds wrong or when the strap needs a whole half a width over. Your skin will toughen some, but we don't wait for that. We change the fit each week until it behaves, and when you grow, we change the parts." Neris watched his face while he spoke, measuring whether this was a speech or a plan, and when she seemed satisfied it was a plan, she relaxed her hands on the stone. "What about school?" the older boy asked from behind them, surprising all 3 because none of them knew he had been listening. "Will she get a go with the leg?" Neris's jaw tightened at the word school. "She's registered," she said. "The hall only opens 3 days now. We teach at home the rest." "I can help with maps," Maurik said, "if you want. Numbers too." "We don't take charity," Neris said by reflex. "It's not charity," Ilari said, quick. "It's practice." Neris exhaled. "Maps and numbers are not a bad use of a man who stares at drains," she said, the smallest hint of dry humor breaking through. Maurik nodded. "I have a stack of blank grid sheets," he said. "We could draw the square and mark where the water sits after rain and where it moves after they patch the seam, and that's a good lesson in both maps and patience." "Patience is a boring subject," the younger boy announced. "It is the only subject," Neris said, not unkind. "Go play." They left the lane to the kids and walked the perimeter once, Ilari testing the foot on the slight crown of the square where the tiles lifted, Maurik noting where the chalk would need repainting tomorrow, and Neris asking a question she had set aside for days and now brought forward because the morning had proven it could handle more weight. "Where is your family?" she said to Maurik, direct and simple. He answered without performance. "Parents gone," he said. "No siblings. I almost married once. She wanted out of the colony, and I couldn't leave the work. We chose different roads, and that was the end of it." "Do you regret it?" she asked. "I regret what my work cost her," he said. "I don't regret the work." Neris looked at Ilari, who was counting the chalk lines aloud in her head. "Work that keeps you here is rare," she said. "People want escape more than repair." "I tried escape once," he said. "It felt like running past a broken gate and telling myself it wasn't my wall." She accepted that without judgment. "If you keep showing up at our door," she said, "some will decide we owe you more than thanks. Then we will teach them to read better," he said. "And if they don't learn, I know how to be loud in the places that make trouble for people who push women in markets." She didn't smile, but something in her posture eased. "You will not always be here," she said. "Say it now, so we do not pretend." "I will not always be here," he said. "But when I say I'll be here tomorrow morning, I'll be here tomorrow morning, and when I cannot come, I will send word with a reason, not silence. Ilari rejoined them, bright and awake again. Tomorrow morning, she said, repeating his promise back to him as a rule. Tomorrow morning, he said, sealing it. They walked back to the laundry block slowly, so her leg could cool down before the stairs, and on the third floor landing, the woman with the mop said to Ilari, "You walked the whole lane," and Ilari said, "I did," and then looked at her mother to make sure the pride fit inside the boundaries they had agreed to keep, and Neris nodded once and unlocked their door. Inside, Malric adjusted the strap one more time and marked the liner with a pencil where the next cut should be. And he left the ball and the chalk and half the tape with them because the tools belonged where the work happened, and at the threshold he paused. "I'll push the repair ticket for the drains again today," he said, "and I'll bring grid sheets for numbers. Do you need anything from the West Market? Soap if the price isn't foolish," Neris said, "and thread, course for the strap." "Soap, thread," he said, and he wrote it down because writing turned intention into a chain you could follow back later. He stepped into the corridor. Ilari balanced on her good foot and lifted the prosthetic an inch, then set it down with a gentle tap that sounded like a small promise against the tile. "See you in the square," she said. "You will," he said, and he meant it. By late morning, the square was fully awake, stalls open, steam rising off cook pots, voices layered into a steady crowd sound that hid small things like nerves, and Malric stood at the edge of the chalk line with a folded stack of grid sheets in his satchel, a roll of tape in his pocket, and his eyes on Ilari as she stretched her leg the way they had practiced, heel out, toe flex, small range first so the liner seated and the strap lay flat. And he checked the fountain base where the crew had. Packed the crack with quick cure mortar that looked rough, but dry, which meant less runoff pooling along the step. The kids were already there, a mix of regulars and two new faces from the next block over, and the older boy from yesterday spun the cone on his finger, then tucked it under his arm and jogged over. "Teams," he said, "we're 4 and 4 if she plays." He pointed at Ilari, not unkind, not cautious, simply practical. Nera stood 3 paces behind Ilari with her hands low at her sides and her weight centered, the posture of a parent who knows how to step in fast without telegraphing it. And Malric glanced at her and got the smallest nod. She would let this start, and she would end it if safety slipped. "Rules," Malric said, loud enough for the group. "No heading the ball. No slide-ins. The chalk line at the fountain is a safe strip. No one crowds there. If someone says stop, the game stops. That's not a rule," one of the new boys said. "It is today," Malric said. He didn't raise his voice. He looked at the boy until the boy looked away. Ilari watched the exchange and touched the strap at her thigh once to confirm it lay flat. "Which side am I on?" she asked. The older boy pointed to his team. "Here." He tossed her a faded strip of cloth as a marker. She tied it on her upper arm with careful movements that didn't tangle the ribbon in her hair. The opening play was slow, passes short and safe. Ilari kept to the lane Malric had chalked yesterday, reading angles, letting the ball move past her twice without chasing. On the third cycle, the older boy sent a pass that would die near her right foot if she stepped in, and she did, planting her good foot, guiding the ball with the inside of her shoe, then sending it back at a speed that told everyone she could keep pace. The sound of her kick was clean, and it changed the faces around her in small ways. Shoulders eased, eyes shifted from her leg to the ball. Malric timed his breaths with the rhythm of play, so his own tension didn't add weight to the square. He watched details that had nothing to do with sport and everything to do with safety. The seam near the drain was still slick. The vendor at the corner had spilled a thin sheen of oil. The cone was too close to the lane. He stepped out casually and moved the cone 2 tiles back, then returned to the fountain edge and kept his hands visible, not clenched, not ready to sprint, just there. Neris tracked the game without moving her feet, only her head and eyes working, and when one of the new boys cut across Ilari's line too late and clipped her elbow, Neris lifted her chin but did not call the play dead because Ilari had already corrected, shoulder down, foot set, ball passed off without a stumble, and the boy who clipped her said, "My bad," quiet and quick, and the game flowed on. On the next turn, the ball popped high on a bad tile. Ilari stepped under it, thought about trying a chest trap, decided against it, and instead let it fall and took it off the bounce with a small, controlled touch, the choice precise rather than showy. She passed to the cropped hair girl who had saluted her days ago, and the girl grinned and sent a hard return that made Elari plant and kick in one motion. And for the first time, she put speed into the ball, and it shot between two defenders and struck the step below the fountain with a hollow knock that made 3 vendors look up. "Goal," the older boy said, and he meant it. Elari stood very still for a beat, then breathed out and looked at her mother. Neris didn't clap. She didn't cry. She let the corner of her mouth move just enough to be seen, then reset her face to neutral, and Elari understood the message. "Good. Now, keep playing." Malric moved to the side and spoke so only Neris could hear. 2 more runs, and we stop for water, then check the liner for rub." "Agreed," she said. "Her right calf is tightening." He watched for it and saw it. A small twitch near the tendon when she pushed off, nothing dramatic but a sign to limit the session, and he counted the touches until the second water break, then called it. "Stop. Water." The kids groaned but came anyway because the air was warm now, and he poured water into cups, adding a pinch of salt to Elari's again. And while they drank, the younger boy asked the next question the square always produced. "What happened to your leg?" he said, direct and blunt. Elari answered before anyone else could speak. "A spanner fell," she said. "I was in the wrong place. It wasn't a story. It was a mistake." The boy nodded like that was enough. "My uncle lost 2 fingers to a fan," he said, and wiggled his hand to show where. "He still fixes the fans." "Then stop making jokes when he drops things," the cropped hair girl said, and the boy shrugged because he knew she was right. Malric knelt to check the liner. The skin was pink where the strap sat, but not raw. He loosened one hole, smoothed the edge of the cutout, and pressed the cuff back into place. "One more short round," he said to Elari. "Then you end on a clean pass, not on a mistake." "Clean pass," she repeated, setting the goal for herself. The last run was the best. The ball moved quickly through 4 players, came to Elari at the edge of the chalk, and she took it with a soft first touch that set up her angle. Then turned her hips, set her shoulders, and sent it square to the older boy, who tapped it to the cropped hair girl, who pressed it to the cone, and someone cheered without thinking, and a vendor hit his burner too hard and a flame rolled high, and for a second the square went bright and loud, and Elari jolted, old fear flickering fast across her face. Then she shook it off with a hard blink and looked back to the ball, which was already at her feet again. "End it," Malric said low and steady. She did. 1 clean pass straight to the cone, not rushed, not showy, just right. "Done," Malric called. Practice over. Groans, laughter, a few claps, the spin-off of energy when a game stops before it collapses from fatigue. The kids drifted to the edges to argue about whose turn it was to carry the cone, and Elari limped once toward the fountain not from pain, but from the muscle fatigue they had predicted, and Neris stepped in under her arm with quiet timing that did not read as rescue, only as an agreed handover between people who knew each other's limits. They sat on the foam edge. Malric gave Elari a small piece of bread and half a cup of water. "How does the strap feel now?" he asked. "Tighter at the back," she said. "Better at the front." "Good," he said. "That means the cutout worked. We'll keep it for 2 days, then reassess." Neris watched Elari's face, not the leg. "Pain. Sore, not sharp," Elari said. "I want to walk the long side once before we go." "One time," Neris said. "Slow." They did the long side, and Malric walked behind, counting her steps to check cadence. Right, left, plant, roll. And he stored the number so he could measure improvement later without saying it out loud and turning it into pressure. When they returned to the fountain, a thin man in maintenance gray walked over from the crew, wiping mortar dust from his hands. "We'll seal the seam tomorrow," he said, nodding at Malric's tag. Someone pushed the ticket hard. "I wrote the words," Malric said. "You did the work." The man shrugged. "Words make the cart move," he said, and headed back to his team. Neris looked at Malric. "How long do you push before a door closes?" she asked, not a challenge, a genuine question about his endurance. "Until I run out of places to bring the file," he said. "Then I bring the file to the door anyway, and make them tell me no with a name. It takes longer than people think. And when they tell you no with a name," she said, "then I mark the name," he said, "and the next time the name needs something from the square has a memory." "You keep ledgers," she said. "I keep ledgers," he agreed. Ilari finished her bread and leaned her head back against the fountain, eyes closed for a handful of breaths. When she opened them, she looked older, not in a sad way, but in the way a body looks once it proves something to itself. "Can I come tomorrow if I do the hallway twice today?" she asked, terms offered like a contract. "Yes," Neris said, "if the skin stays intact." "Yes," Malric said, "and I'll bring a different ball with a better bladder." Ilari nodded and then surprised both of them by looking at Malric and asking, "Do you want to eat with us today?" The question simple, but loaded because it meant crossing a boundary from public to private on a day when the square had already demanded a lot. Malric looked to Neris for the answer, because it wasn't his choice to make. She held his eyes for a second, thinking through the same calculus she had done every time he knocked. "Yes," she said, "if you bring maps and do not talk while I cook." "Done," Malric said, and he felt something in his chest unlock that had nothing to do with achievement and everything to do with being allowed to be useful in a room that mattered. They packed up slowly. Malric rewound the tape, left the chalk with the cone group, and wiped mud off the foam before tucking it under his arm. He walked the pace Ilari set, not faster, not slower, and at the laundry block entranced the woman with the mop set her bucket aside and said to